Session that I spoke on was called Measuring Success, and it was relating to how we use the tools in our lives to measure success, and we make sure that they are the right tools, because if we're not using the right tools, then we'll find that we may be measuring our lives, the success that we have, the celebrations that we take time to celebrate. They may not be measured accurately, and we may be missing out on a lot of things, thinking that we've not been as successful as maybe we wanted to be or should have been. And so using the right tools is absolutely essential as we're looking at how much success we've had in our lives. We need to make sure that we're using the right measurements, units of measurement. When we start to talk about success, the first thing I like to do is identify specifically what it is that we're talking about. And so we ask, well, what is success? Because in order to measure it, we need to know what it is. Success is something that usually we define by measurements. It's a goal set. It's how we've reached it. We're looking at ways of measuring our progress towards it. And so our measurements are recorded with instruments. We have to have some way of measuring the amount of success or the strides that we've taken to work our way or become closer to achieving the success that we're looking for. So we have to have some unit of measurement in order to make these recordings with. And so we will use instruments to measure success and record those specific measurements. Now, success, when we're using those measurements and so forth, it also proves our progress toward it, so that we can see how far we've gone or how far we've come since we first started a journey or first took our steps towards something that we said we wanted to do or achieve or move toward. So success, when we measure it, it helps us prove our progress. The other thing that it helps us do is it contributes to our view of our self-worth. Because as we're moving toward our goals, as we're making progress in our lives, we begin to see that we have made contributions, and those contributions add up and help propel us forward, help move us closer to our goals. So when we look at success, we can use these measurements to be a powerful thing. But they're powerful in good ways and bad ways, and it depends on how we use them, how we're measuring our success, as to whether we're seeing our success in a good way or whether we're seeing our success in a negative way. What I mean by that is, if we're not using the right tools to measure our success, we may get a bad measurement. We may be looking at it and saying, I haven't made success at all, when in fact we have. We're just looking at it from the wrong viewpoint. Our perspective is not correct. So we think we've not made any success in our lives. We've lived our whole life and just not ever really done anything. But, well, yes, we have. We're just using the wrong tools to measure our success by. So we don't see how successful we've really been. We don't see how far we've actually come in our lifetime, and we think we've not been successful when actually we have. So that's why, as we measure success and we know that success is moving towards something that we want to do or achieve or get to, and we have to have those right tools to measure it by in order to be able to see how successful we've actually been. Many times we'll disqualify ourselves or would discount things, steps that we've taken that have been successful, and think that, well, I haven't made much success or progress, when in fact we really, really have. Now, if we think about our lives as we go back in time, we will see that many times our lives were defined as we first started our journeys. Even if you go back to when you just got out of high school, for some of us that's a very long time ago. If we look at the journey since we left high school and really started living our lives and making plans, initially, our lives were built around a fairy tale. When we thought about what we wanted to achieve in our lives, the success that we wanted to reach, the things in our lives were built upon fairy tales. And so we had this once upon a time mindset where maybe we wanted to be successful and live our lives to obtain a really big house, like the castle mindset. That's what we wanted in order to be successful. I want to live in a really, really big house and have it kind of castle-like, 5 bedrooms, 10 bathrooms, and all kinds of living areas and the amenities to go along with it. And that was our idea of achieving success in that life area. Maybe it was finding the perfect spouse and living our lives with just a perfect relationship. And so our success in life as we started our journey, we used to think and dream about finding the perfect spouse and living up to that. And we were going to measure our success by reaching that. Maybe it was having our perfect little children, always, dressed up and never dirty and just always ready to say yes and no and please and thank you. And they were not ever going to get in trouble at school or anything like that. So we had this once upon a time mindset of our children being in school and living at home. And it was just this perfect image. It was the perfect family. And then maybe we had our career set and all we saw was ourselves climbing the corporate ladder, just going higher and higher and higher and becoming more successful in that aspect. And because our careers were blossoming and booming and our relationships at home were good, the money was just rolling in. It was following us. And so our success we saw as being from a monetary perspective, a standpoint of having lots of money and achievement coming into our lives. And then we started viewing our success from that once upon a time as we thought about getting older and living our lives and our kids growing up and going off to college. Then we finally reached that point with our spouse where we could retire and we could travel and end up on the beaches and so forth. And that was going to be the perfect vision of our successful career leading to our perfect retirement scenario. We were just going to travel the world and not have a care as we sat on the beaches and watched the sunsets every night. And that was our once upon a time mindset. But then reality sets in and we start living our lives. Well, we don't have the perfect career. And as we live our lives, we find out that our kids do make mistakes and they talk back sometimes. And every once in a while, you might get a phone call from a teacher. And there are issues at school that with their friends and so forth, we just never anticipated. And our success based on this unlimited career path and all of this money coming in and our perfect retirement starts to erode because real life sets in. And reality happens. And we start comparing that fairy tale vision that we had with what's really happening now. And as we do that, we find that, wow, I haven't been successful at all. If that's what I'm basing my success off of. If I'm actually using the wrong units of measurement to measure my success because I'm trying to measure it based upon the perfect life that I once envisioned, we're going to find that we haven't been successful at all. And if that is our perspective, then we feel defeated. We feel that we've failed somewhere, that we haven't lived up to those expectations or what we anticipated. And so we find that we may be wearing ourselves down because we were chasing something that just wasn't a reality in the first place. But yet that's what we've been running after our entire lives, and we're worn out and we're tired. And honestly, we've had a successful life. It just didn't look like this. It's not been success based on a fairy tale. It's not been success based on what I initially thought. Maybe life has had a lot of twists and turns, and I don't have the mansion, but I have a really nice modest home. It's very simple, and it's 3 bedrooms and 2 baths instead of the initial 5 bedrooms and 10 baths that I wanted with all those amenities. And maybe my relationship is a lot different. I don't have the perfect spouse, but I have a spouse that I love more than anything and really respects me and is wonderful for the family. And I'm very pleased with that, even though it wasn't a perfect fairy tale relationship. And my kids, they have some things that go on from time to time, but overall I'm very blessed because my children are wonderful and they do listen, and we have a lot of fun together, and our family unit is a wonderful family unit, though it is far from that perfect ideal that we initially had. And we go from having all of this money and just wealth coming in because our careers, we've just been so successful. Maybe we've changed jobs several times, or we discovered that we wanted to do something different than initially anticipated with that fairy tale lifestyle we used to envision when we first started on our journeys. And now we find that we've gone from the mindset of our perfect life was involving just money, 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 having an abundance of it, to becoming a successful coupon clipper. And so we find that our success, the reality of it is that our success is based in how much money we actually save instead of how much we spend. And so our vacations go from exotic to just being peaceful and sometimes quiet and enjoying what we have, because we find the time and enjoy just staying close to home and maybe not traveling the world and having all of these fantasy vacations. So we have to look at, when we measure success, and we're talking about measuring it in the proper units using the right tools, is that we're not measuring it based on that once upon a time scenario that we once thought we wanted, that was going to be how we measured our lives successfully because everything fell into place and happened perfectly. It doesn't necessarily end up that way. The reality is, as life happens, and we find successful moments rooted in that reality, it may look much different than what we initially said we wanted. And it's not perfect, but we learn that sometimes success is the simple things that happen within our life areas and within the moments that we live. So measuring our lives with the proper instruments is important, and that instrument is not measuring our success in life by perfection. It's learning to measure it by the moments and the memories that we make as it happens, even in the imperfections. We find that we've had some successful moments. I have a perfect story of this because the right tools make all the difference in the world when we're trying to measure our success. And the story goes back to a camping trip that I took with my young children years ago. I decided that I was going to take them camping on a beach. And this beach was in Florida, and it happened to be along the Jacksonville coast. And we had to take a ferry to get out to this island that we were going camping on. And so we loaded the car up. I packed all the tents. I had kites. I took yarn because we were going to do the cat's cradle and make all those yarn things with our hands and do Jacob's ladder and all that kind of stuff in our tent. And I had a book that showed us how to do all that stuff. We were just really going to spend some quality time together. And my children were young. They were all 10 and under. And so we head out, we drive, we get on the ferry, we take the ferry across the river. We get out to the campground, we get checked in, we set the tent up, we're pulling everything out. I realize that the stakes I have are not going in the sand the way they need to, because we've never camped on the beach before. Well, I had the right instruments. I had some of them, but not all of them. I realized that the one thing I didn't have that I really needed was a hammer, because I was having to hammer the stakes into this sand. And that was a challenge. I'd never done that before. Well, the stakes just wouldn't stay in at all, and they kept popping back up. So I had to get back in the car, take the ferry back across into town. We had to go and get some heavy-duty stakes at the store. I got those, still didn't pick up a hammer. Went back to the campground. I'm still trying to hammer these things in. Well, the only thing I had to get these supersonic huge stakes in the sand was a high-heeled shoe. I'm trying to hammer using a high-heeled shoe. And let me tell you, it did not work so well. But we made it work. And at one point, the park ranger came by and he says, "Ma'am, can I help you?" And I realized that he's sitting back there in his truck just watching me hammer away at these stakes, trying to get them into this sand on the beach to get our tent to stay and not blow away in the wind. Because it was a windy weekend, and it happened to be extremely cold. Now, I had planned on this trip being a success because I didn't think in Florida that the weather forecast was going to hold out. I thought it's not going to be that cold. We'll be fine. It was freezing, and we were miserable, and we just wanted a shelter to get out of the wind. So to keep the tent from blowing away, I'm trying to hammer those huge stakes in the ground with a high heel. With this park ranger parked behind me, I'm sure he was just laughing. And he's watching me do this and asking if I need help. And he said, well, I think I've got a hammer. I can go back and I can see what I can find and I'll bring one back. Well, he never returned. I think what happened is that he was laughing so hard when he drove away, he literally died laughing, and that's why he never came back. So to finish it off, what I had to do to keep the tent from blowing away, because I could not get those stakes in the ground to stay with a high-heeled shoe, was I had to anchor the tent to my car. And the only thing I had at that point to anchor the tent to my car was the yarn that I took for my kids and I to do the cat's cradle and Jacob's ladder in the tent. So I had to run the yarn through the tent grommets that we were using to stake the tent in the ground that wasn't working. And I had to run that yarn through those things of the tent onto the wheel wells of my car so that the tent was now anchored to my car wheels. So now I couldn't drive anywhere unless we cut the strings, the yarn to the tent away from my car, because otherwise I'd be dragging the tent next to the car. But the car also worked as a windbreak to kind of keep the wind off of it, which helped a little bit. But it was just, honestly, you would have thought it was a disaster. But we made it work. I had to take what tools I had, and I had to work it so that we could get that tent to not blow away and be anchored to stay there so that we could actually have our camping trip and live this out. This was our vacation, and we were just determined to make it work. Well, long story short, the guy never came back. The tent was anchored to my car. It was tied to my car wheel wells with string. I had that run through the hubcaps of my wheels because it has the holes in it, and so that's what I ran it through and just tied knots in it, and it held. But it was so cold that we stayed one night and we left. It was miserably cold. We just could not get warm because then we had sleeping bags and stuff, but that sand just held that cold in, and it was so damp. We ended up leaving. It was about middle of the night, I think 2 a.m., and I started to drive home. We just couldn't do it because we were miserable. Now, depending on how we would choose to measure this trip, to measure our success at having this vacation, we had two ways to measure it. We could take and measure it with the wrong set of tools because we were looking for perfection. I wanted it to be a perfect vacation for my kids and I that spring break. But it was so far from perfect. So I could have said it was a total failure. We didn't succeed at anything. Or I could look at the reality of it and say, you know what? We did succeed. We had a great time despite it. It was hilarious. We started measuring it by different units of measurement, by the proper units of measurement. What was our priority? The real priority behind that vacation was to spend time with each other. Did we do that? Absolutely we did. Okay, that was a success. Did we get to play games while we were together? Absolutely, we did. We sat in the tent before we left, and we had that time together. And so when we started breaking it down and looking at the successes that we had, the small successes, though imperfect, we were most definitely successful. We got to spend time together. Did we take a vacation? Yes, we did. So we were successful again. Did we get to cook out over a campfire and enjoy the evening out? Of course we did. So that was another success. Did we create a memory? Yes, we did. Did we laugh and have a good time? Absolutely. We still laugh over that trip. That trip is one that is talked about in my family. That nobody will forget about it because we had such a good time on it, and it is absolutely hilarious. The story of how I had to get the tent anchored, of how we had to go back into town, it was an adventure. So yes, all of these things added up. It was a success. It was just a different kind of success, and it ended on a different note than what we thought, but we absolutely had a good time. We created memories. We got to spend time together. And things like that. We did play the games that we set out to play. So when you look at what the actual goals were, it was to spend time together. It was to have some fun. It was to create memories. Yes, we did succeed. If we looked at perfection, was it a perfect vacation? Did we get to stay the whole time? Did we get to do everything as we planned it out? No, we didn't. But does that mean that we failed at success? No, it doesn't. Absolutely not. We have to be aware of how we measure the success in life as we live out the things that we set out to live, because sometimes our success is different than what we initially thought. It is not going to be based on a fairy tale measurement of success. Many times, fairy tales just don't hold up. That perfection turns into reality. So we have to start breaking it down to say what were the underlying goals we really wanted to achieve. And we measure our units of success based on that and not the perfection. Because if we only try to base our life success in any life area, whether it's a vacation with the family or our careers or our health or any other life area, we're going to say, oh no, I failed. So we have to make sure that we're using the proper instruments, which are our priorities. Look at what the underlying priority was and measure your life against that. And you'll see that you've had many, many small successes along the way, even though how it turned out was so far from reality. So that's what I wanted to cover in the initial part of this, is as we measure success, we have to make sure that we're using the proper tools and units of measurement. Those proper tools and units of measurements are our priorities. What was it that we wanted to achieve as we lived this out? And when we know what our priority is that we're trying to accomplish, we can measure that and say, even though it wasn't exactly as planned, we were definitely successful. And then you got to celebrate those successes. Because if you don't, you may be overlooking them and thinking that you've lived your whole life being unsuccessful and that you really didn't accomplish anything, when that's not true. It's just that you're using the wrong tools and the wrong units of measurement to see the progress that you've actually made. And so we have to be aware of that. Now, from here, what we're going to do is we're going to cover the top 10 units of measurement of how we normally measure our lives, which in many ways are inaccurate units of measurement that we try to live up to because they are based on that perfection. And when we try to measure ourselves up against this, we fail. We just look at it and say, well, I didn't live up to that, or I can't live up to that. And so we feel that we failed to be successful based on these top 10 things. So here's where I'm going to cover it. The measurement number 10 that we try to measure our success in life is by our dress. How we dress. And that includes our clothing, our jewelry, our shoes, our contentedness. And in this thing, I challenged individuals to think of 5 things. I wanted them to be aware that before the end of the day, there would be 5 things that you will see on somebody else in the way that they dress, or what they have on, or what they're wearing. Something that they have that will make you feel uncontented about the way you dress. And you're going to start comparing yourself to that. And if you do that, you'll find that maybe you think of the way that you dress as being somewhere where you're not successful. And we can't allow this to happen in our lives because we're going to feel that we didn't succeed. So we try to base our success in life just in how we dress. And it sounds ridiculous, but it's true. There will be 5 things that you see on somebody today in the way that they're dressed. And you'll look at it and think that you need to dress that way. And you'll start feeling inferior, or that you're not successful because you don't have that, or you're not dressed that way. And I can guarantee there'll be 5 things every day that we'll see that we'll compare ourselves to in the way that somebody else is dressed. Because we're going to look at what they're wearing. We're going to look at their clothing, their shoes, their jewelry. And we're going to say, oh wow, I want that. I want that. And somehow we begin to believe that if we have that, or if we dress that way, that we'll be successful. But that is not necessarily true. This is one of the top 10 false units of measurement that we try to measure our life success by, and it's how we dress. And we compare that to each other. And when we do that, we start feeling inferior. That, oh, I'm not successful. Well, if I dress that way, or if I had that, ooh, I love that necklace, wow. And we start to see ourselves in it and feel that if we obtain that, all of a sudden, we have achieved some sort of success, which is just not true. Measurement number 9 and how we try to identify or feel successful in our lives is by the type of car we drive. Now, I know the type of car that we wanted when we were 16 was much different than the type of car that we see at 35 that defines our units of success. At 16, we all want the sports car. I thought at 16 I was going to die because the only car I had was a Ford Pinto. It was not cool. And so I could never be successful as long as I had a Ford Pinto because it just wasn't cool. How could I ever be successful driving a car like that? I was going to pull up into the school parking lot and I'd hide my face. I couldn't be successful in that. But at 35, you'll find that your unit of success changes because it's no longer the fancy sports car that you're looking for that might make you successful. All of a sudden, it could be a minivan or an SUV because your priorities have changed. See, at 16, our priority is to look cool. So our unit of success is going to be based on that priority. We don't care about anything else. We just got to be cool. So that's going to define our measurement of success. If we can look cool, then wow, we're successful. But at 35, it's no longer about looking cool. It's about being able to squeeze everybody in the same vehicle. That becomes your measurement of success because now you've got a family. So your priority is not just to look cool, but it's to be able to get everybody in the same vehicle so you can only make one trip instead of having to cart your family around in 2 separate vehicles because the kids have grown, they're bigger, or you've got a whole crew with you. So our units of success change over time, and if we're measuring ourselves by the wrong thing, by trying to look cool, when really our unit of success should be, now we just need to be able to get everybody in the same vehicle at the same time. We realize that our success has changed. It doesn't mean that because we're not looking cool, we're not successful. Absolutely not. The sports car doesn't define our success. What defines our success is being able to meet what is now a priority in our life. That's what drives our success, and our units of measurement will change throughout our lifetimes. We also learned that it's not what we drive that makes us alive. Our priorities are not hinged upon what we drive, and our life does not revolve around being cool anymore. It's in living out our priorities that our life becomes alive, and as we live out what's important to us, that's what brings life to us, not necessarily a model of car or a method of looking cool that makes us feel alive. Measurement number 8 that many times we try to measure our lives by incorrectly, or how successful we are in life, is by our house. The size of home that we have, the type of home. Our home, we think, speaks success or being successful or not being successful, and that is not true. So we think that the bigger house with all the amenities, with the latest styles in it, and it's just perfectly kept, having more makes us successful. And as we go through life and as we live, we realize that is not true. That is one of those units of measurement that we try to live up to, and we realize it just doesn't work. That the size of my home or the type of home does not define how successful I am in life. And here's why. When we first started out, and I spoke about that fairy tale idea that we had about how our lives were going to turn out and how our success was going to, what it was going to look like. But having this idea of perfection, we thought about, oh yeah, I want that big home. I want the castle. I want 10 bedrooms. I want everybody to have their own bathroom. I want a pool. I want the jacuzzi. I want, fireplaces in every room. And I want this. I just want all this stuff in it. Well, as we live our lives, sometimes we find that simplicity is not overrated. It is something extremely important, because when we wanted that big house, I think something we forgot in our fairy tale when we were dreaming this, when we were saying, yeah, I want a really big home and that's how I'm going to define my success, we forgot that somebody was going to have to clean that home. And so that house size, it does matter. So our success may change in life when we go from thinking that we wanted the biggest home with all these amenities, because somebody's got to keep that pool up, and somebody's got to clean all those bedrooms, and somebody's got to clean all those bathrooms and all this stuff. What do we do with it? Our unit of success sometimes begins to be measured not by in everything that we have, but in how simple our lives can be. We don't want all that stuff anymore. We want to downsize. We start looking at simplicity, that having less is more, because that allows us to live more for the priorities than for the stuff. And when we're living more for our priorities and less for the stuff, we find that we're being successful because we're actually able to start enjoying what we have, and we're not trapped by having so much. We're not trapped in just being surrounded by stuff, or having that, we got to spend 8 hours of our weekend cleaning because our home is so big. No, I got a small house. I clean in an hour, and the rest of the time I'm out enjoying doing what I want to do, spending time with my family, loving on my kids, and I don't have all these things weighing me down. So when we first started out saying that, yeah, I'm going to measure my success in life by the type of home that I have, because it's going to be big and fancy and massive, it changes. And all of a sudden we're measuring our home by how small it is and how easy it is to maintain. And then because of that, it's allowing us more time for the other things that we really like. We find that our measurements for success change. This is just another way. When I say this measurement number 8 here, our house size, we were thinking at once that, well, I'm going to measure the amount of success I have by the type of home I have. And I think that that does change as we go through life, and that these are just some of the ways that that happens. Measurement number 7, and how we were going to measure our lives and say that we were successful, has to do with our finances. So measurement number 7, and it's our finances, how much money we have. We thought more money meant more success. The more we bring in was because we were being more successful in our lives. So we were looking at how much in finances we had. We were looking at our bank accounts, the number of accounts that we would have, our savings, how much we'd have in savings, our retirement. Where are we going to stash away for retirement so we're going to be able to travel the world and do all these things and not have to worry about it. Our budgets determined our success. The higher the budget, the more money we could spend. We all wanted that unlimited budget. So measurement number 7, we were going to have just a budget that would allow anything and everything. That's how we thought we would measure the success in our lives. But our lives change, and pretty soon we find that it's not about having an abundance of finances. It's not about having 10 bank accounts and savings coming out the wazoo and never being able to, or never having to worry about money that makes us successful. Having a budget does make us successful, and it really doesn't matter whether it's a big budget or a small budget. Our success comes when we learn that just having a budget and living within that budget is our success. And it doesn't matter how big that budget is. We can be successful even with a very small budget. How? We find that Olympic couponing, we become very successful. Because I know early on when we thought about measuring our success in life, we wanted these unlimited budgets. Well, reality sets in and we find that we do need to clip coupons, and we can be successful every time we save money. We can be successful whether or not we have a big savings account or a small savings account. Whether you save $100 or $100,000, it doesn't really set the standard for our success, because what we have to do is look at our individual budget, our individual financial situation. If all you have is $100 to put in savings, and you put it in savings, you are successful. If you have $100,000 and you put that $100,000 in savings, you're still successful. If you only put $100 in savings because that's all you have, it doesn't mean that you're not successful in your finances. It just means that your financial picture is different than somebody else's who has more. But it doesn't mean that you're not successful because you're putting what you have into savings. You're putting any amount into retirement is successful. If you are working toward a goal, but you're living within your means with what's available to you, that's success. It doesn't have to, success doesn't only come when you have $1 million to put away. Whether you got $1 million or $100, if you are doing something with that, and you're saving and you're budgeting and you're clipping coupons and you're living within your means, that is success. It doesn't matter what the number is. What matters is what you're doing with that. So when we measure our units of success, when we measure the success that we're having in our financial areas in life, we have to get away from the mindset that we have to have a lot of money in order to be successful. We don't have to have a lot of money. It depends on what we're doing with the amount that we have that makes us successful. So here again, this is where measuring our success in life using the proper tools becomes so important, because we would look at it and easily we could look at this and say, oh, I'm not successful because I only have a savings account with $100 in it. Well, how much do you bring in? That $100 is a lot of money to you. Sometimes it's everything to a person. And if you've taken everything and put it in savings, you've really been successful. Congratulations. So it's not how much we have, it's just what we do with it. And we have to look at how we measure our success that works for our priorities and our life situation. Does it mean we haven't been successful? Absolutely, we've had success in these areas. We just have to make sure that we're measuring it correctly, because if we don't, we get caught up in this, I haven't been successful, and we overlook the times and the areas in life where really we are being successful. We're just measuring it and comparing it to the wrong thing, which is what will work for somebody else, but it doesn't work for us. And that's why we have to be really careful when we measure our finances. This can be one of the areas that we measure incorrectly. Okay, so measurement number 6 of how we can incorrectly measure our life success is when we look at our relationships. This is a big one. We all thought we were going to have a perfect marriage, and we were going to have those perfect kids, and we were going to live like the Brady Bunch, where everything just worked out. Our lives were designed by Disney because we were going to live a perfect little life. We were going to have a perfect little family that did the perfect things all the time. It's the Leave It to Beaver kind of mentality. And then reality sets in, and maybe we get a phone call from the school because our kid had a bad day, or they made a mistake, or, our husband doesn't live up to what we initially thought, and we just had these wrong expectations. And so because our expectations were not proper for our family or even reality as it is, we felt that we had failed. We didn't see the success. But that's not true. Our relationships will be unique, and they will look much differently than what somebody else's will. But it doesn't mean that we have not been successful in them. It doesn't mean that we can't have a good marriage. It doesn't mean that we have not lived as we wanted to. Absolutely not. We've been successful in many areas. We just have to be careful that we don't compare it to something that doesn't work for our family, is not a priority for us, or isn't even based on reality, because it's based on fiction. And many times we see that. We try to live up to a script, and our lives are not scripted. They are absolutely unscripted. That's why TV is not a good unit of measurement. Don't compare yourself to TV families. Don't compare yourselves to other families, because our lives don't happen as a script. They happen, and a lot of times we're reacting to things. And it doesn't mean that our lives are not going going to be successful. They are. Our relationships are going to be successful. But there are going to be challenges within those relationships. Success is just sticking with them, with our families, with our kids, with our spouses, to work through those obstacles and challenges. That's where the successful relationships come in. It's not having a perfect anything. It's being able to stick together and work through those challenges that we find the success in our relationships. And we find, honestly, that our relationships are strengthened because of that. So we have to be very careful when we're trying to measure our relationships against what we would think would be successful. Because if our thoughts of success are not even based on reality or right for our family or the people that we are in relationships with, we're going to set ourselves up for failure, when really we haven't failed at all, because challenges are to be expected. Okay, so measurement number 5 is when we try to measure our life success by a number on a scale. We've all stepped on a scale. We all worry about our weight. And so sometimes we ridiculously think that our life success is hinged by how much we weigh, or how much we don't weigh. And that is not true, because no matter what we weigh, we can have a successful life. But we tend to think that success in our lives is defined by the number of the scale that we step on as we measure our weight, or by the number that's on the tag inside of our clothing. And so then we start living our lives based on this. We feel that if we are a certain size, then we've been a success. If we get over a certain size, ooh, I've totally failed because I don't look like this, or I don't fit into this, or ooh, my number is too high. And so we erroneously start to measure our self-worth against that, and we feel that we have not been successful because we couldn't look a certain way based on our weight. So then we start living in this mindset: if I weighed that, I would be successful. If I could lose this 20 or 25 pounds or 50 pounds, I could be successful. If I looked like that, I would be successful. And that's not necessarily true. We are successful in our lives, and it doesn't have anything to do with our weight. Now, our health is a life area. It is one of the 9 life areas that I coach and teach on in the life management training. And it is an important life area. But our lives are not hinged in this area alone, and we cannot get caught in the mindset of, if my weight was okay, then my whole life would be okay. That is not true, and we don't want to live in that. Our weight is just one of the areas of our lives that is hinged in our health, and so it is important, but it doesn't define whether or not our whole lives have been successful or a failure. And sometimes we tend to focus on one thing, and some days there will be a day when you will focus on this one number. You'll get on that scale and you'll see it and you'll just be, ugh, I'm such a failure. And that's not true. We're just focused on that at that moment in time, and so we start undoing everything that has been a success in our lives because that's all we're focused on. Oh, I've been such a failure. Oh, I'm so fat. And that's not true. And so this is where we start living our lives based on, are we going to eat cake? Are we not going to eat cake? Are we going to do this shake thing? Or are we not going to do this shake thing? Am I going to be successful today because I didn't eat this? Or am I going to be successful because I did eat that? And so we just get caught up on it, and our focus gets fuzzy, and then we feel that we're not successful. And when that happens, especially with our weight, it affects our self-esteem, and once our self-esteem is affected, it really starts to snowball into other areas of our lives because our self-esteem affects a lot of other things. We can get focused on our weight and let that become our mindset, how we feel like a failure, and then we can become depressed about it, and then that'll start affecting our relationships. So when we talk about having the perfect relationships and so forth, it's funny how all of this kind of works together, and it can touch and feed those other life areas of where we feel that we've been successful or not successful. If we feel terrible about our weight, all of a sudden, oh, we've just been a failure everywhere. Nope, I've just failed at everything. And that is not true. So when we measure our success based on our weight, we have to be careful that we are being true to the successes that we've had in our lives. Not every success in life has been attached to our weight. Very little of our success in life is actually attached to our weight. But our minds can get wrapped around that number or the size of that tag inside of our clothing and can affect so many other life areas because our self-esteem gets wrapped up into that. So we have to be careful when we're measuring success not to let it get wrapped up in what we weigh, because that is an inaccurate measurement of our success in life. Okay, measurement number 4. Do versus be. This is where we have so much of our success wrapped up in our careers and the things that we do. Even stay-at-home moms can get wrapped up in this career thing of everything that we do versus who we are, what we just learned to be, what we've become over time. And that is important because when we measure success, it's not about everything that we do. What we do, it is important to us. It's an identity. But it doesn't mean that what we do isn't important or that we haven't been successful at it. You could be a career woman and you can be very successful at it, and that would be your success. You can be a stay-at-home mom and be very good at it, and that is your success in what you're doing. So, but it also, you can't lose yourself in that and forget who it is that you really are and what you enjoy. Because if you're always doing, you can kind of forget that and get lost in it. And then you don't see that there is success in not just what you do, but who you've become over the years from your life experiences. And so we have to look at life experience and learn to pull out our units of success from those experiences, what we've learned over time. Not just what we've done over time, but what we've learned and what that's meant as it's shaped our character. And we've learned who we've become. And we see the progress that we've made over the years, because that also defines our success. But if we only look to the do, we will get lost in that and not really see how successful we've become over the years just in our character formation of who we've truly become, of how we've been molded and shaped over the years, because that is success as well. So when we look at defining our success and what we do, we don't want to get caught in the do trap. We have to also see who we've become over time and learn to see success built into that as well. Because who you've become, it is important as we mature and as we age. Life experience plays into that. And we have all had experiences, things that we've lived through, challenges that we've overcome, things that have molded and shaped our character that has contributed to success. That is success when you look at who you've become over the years. And so when we look at that and we define it, we see that we have a whole new way to measure success in our lives. It's like, wow, I've been through a lot. I've learned a lot. Look at who I've become. There's a lot of success that many times is overlooked in the who, because we get so focused on the do and we lose that. And that's crazy. There's a lot of success to be drawn out of the who we've become. It's not just the who. And sometimes we get so focused on climbing the ladder that that's all we see. We're just doing. We become what we call ladder lovers. If we're not climbing some sort of ladder, achieving, then we're not successful. And that's not necessarily true. So we have to look at the different things that we do in life, because yes, those they are successes. Achievements are important, but that's not where we stop. It's also looking at the who we've become in life that we measure our success by. Now, one story that I gave on the career spectrum of this was the overachiever. And it was a story about a Mexican fisherman and a Harvard MBA student. And this is one of my favorite stories, because the MBA student comes in and is talking to the fisherman, and he says, "Hey, I see that you've caught quite a few fish here today." And the fisherman says, "Yeah," he says, "I did. It's just enough, for me to get by on. I have enough here. I can take to the market and sell, and then I can go home and take home the money to my family and spend time with my kids and my spouse and my friends, and yeah, it's just enough. But the MBA student looks at him, and because he's so achievement oriented, that he's scratching his head and going, wow, we could achieve a lot more here, we could achieve a lot more. And so it's all achievement based. So he says, you could catch even more fish, and we could get you a fleet of boats, and then you could have a whole operation here, and you could open a whole manufacturing plant, and you could actually can fish, and then you could get into the business of shipping it out, and then you could become a distributor, and then you could send all of those to market, and then as you do all that, you could eventually get to a point where then you could sell all that, and then you'd have enough money to take all these fancy vacations, and then you'd have time to spend with your family and everything else. And the fisherman kind of, he's listening, but he looks at him after he goes through this whole thing of how he could grow this business to become this massive operation. He could do all this stuff, and then eventually he'd have the financial freedom and the time to spend with his family. And the fisherman looks at him and he says, why would I want to do all that? Because isn't that what I'm doing now? What he was getting at was there was a simplicity of what he was doing that was allowing him to live for his priorities. Those priorities it was working, it was making enough money, but it was also having enough time left over so that he could spend time with his kids and his friends. But the other person was so achievement oriented that all they saw was you could do this, you could do that, you could do this, and it would lead to this, and it would get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and then eventually you could sell it all off to get back to the simple. And so to the little guy, it didn't make much sense because he was already living and enjoying life based on his priorities. He was already doing that. He didn't need to have and do to gain all that to be able to then sell it off to get back to what he was doing. To him, it didn't make any sense. He was already doing this. And so that's one of my favorite stories, because success is not always built on how big we are, how much we grow, how much we gain, to where we grow and get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Because honestly, our success is measured by the small things. What is it that we want to do with our time? What are our priorities? When we get down to what our priorities are, we find that we're very successful in living to meet that. And we don't have to be going and doing all the time, or gaining and gaining and gaining. Sometimes it's pushing off the complicated to get back to the simple, that we are able to actually measure how successful our lives are. We don't have to have big and grandiose things to be successful. We can actually measure our success by the simple things. What is it that I want to live my life for? What is it that I want to do with my time? What is it that I want to do with my resources? And when we break it down and look at it and say, am I doing that now? I'm already successful. Yes, I am, because I am doing this now. It wasn't ever about the big and gaining more and having all of this stuff and growing and growing and growing. Because sometimes when we grow, we get so big that we forget what it was that we really wanted to live for initially. We've gotten so far away from our real successes. We might be successful in doing those things, but it's taken us away from our priorities. And if we've gotten so far away from our life priorities, are we really simple? Okay, so measurement number 3. We will sometimes try to measure the success in our lives by the number of bad and good hair days. And I know we've all done this. If you have a bad hair day, you'll just swear up and down, I can't be successful today. Because it erodes your self-esteem, it plummets, and you're just like, nope, not today, it's not going to happen. But if you have a good day, you can rock through that day and you can get stuff done. I know we've all been there. It's like, so we try to measure our life sometimes by the number of bad hair days or good hair days, and it's crazy, but it's true. So we say, wow, today I've had a really bad hair day. I just can't be successful today. It's a wash. And is that really true? Sometimes we have to take the hair and just do away with it, and we have to just put on a happy face and get through life anyways, and not measure our lives by the number of bad hair days or the good hair days that we have. And sometimes it's really hard when something, even like your hair, messes with your self-esteem. That's crazy, but think about it. If you ever had you had something important coming up, you had an interview or a meeting or something that was very important to you, family pictures, and you're going to do this and you just cannot get a good hair day. You're looking in the mirror and you're like, oh, of all days, really? Why does my hair have to look like this today? You just feel like you're not successful. But does your hair really define what success you've had and what success you have not had? No, it doesn't. It's attached to one moment in time. So the picture may not turn out okay. But does that mean that now, because you've had a bad hair day, that your whole life has not been a success? But many times that's how we look at it. In that moment, we'll feel that everything's just been a failure. Forget it. And that's not true. But we can really easily get caught up in that. And think about it. If we're having a good hair day, it's like you remember in every success that you've ever had. And you're walking confidently through life. A lot of times we'll find ourselves strutting through the day because my hair looks really good. I'm having a good day. I could leap that tall building today because my hair looks good. And that is so not true. Now, I've begun to measure my life in some ways by the amount of laughter I can have over my hair. Instead of having a bad hair day or a good hair day, I just laugh at it, and every day is a funny hair day. Especially with the curls that I have. Getting used to the curls has been a challenge. My hair, I always tell people, it's a love-hate relationship. I love my curls, but some days I hate them as much as I love them. I can tell how humid it is outside by the big hair that I have. On really humid days, my hair is huge. So I can walk outside and watch my hair grow, and I'm like, yeah, it's humid. Or I can walk outside and it's dry and my hair does not grow. In fact, one of the jokes I have is that my hair, sometimes when it's very humid out, I feel like a chia pet because my hair, my curls will grow depending on the amount of humidity in the air. It's like I can walk outside and just see it grow. And I've begun to laugh at it. I don't let it define whether or not I feel successful on that day. Even if there is a training or a teaching coming up and I have to go and do it and I'm like, wow, my hair is just a bad hair day. I have learned to laugh it off and to just realize my success in life is based on being able to laugh at certain things because it's just the way it is. So can I laugh and shrug it off, and can I go and rock that training? Can I go and rock this day? So I got to record 20 video segments in the next 24 hours. And this is how my hair turned out. Can I laugh it off? Yes, I can. That's a success. That my success is not hinged in how my hair looks at any particular moment. And I know that is especially women, that this is something that we try to define the success in our lives by, is how our hair looks. We want Jennifer Aniston hair. We want our hair just to look perfect so that we feel good and we can feel like we can be such a success on that day. No matter what it is that's happening, we want to be able to rock our way through it. And sometimes measuring our success in life cannot be attached to things like this, because you can have a bad hair day and you can still rock the socks off of something and get through it and just learn to laugh at it. So on those bad hair days, our measurement of life success can be in our ability just to laugh at it and be like, this is just the way it is. And learn to embrace it and run through it anyways and do the best we can. That laughter comes in and plays into it, and we find we've got more success in our lives than we ever thought possible, just because we can base our perspective off of our ability to adapt, to laugh, to not feel bad because, well, it's a bad hair day, or I guess I'm going to look goofy today, whatever. We just work our way through it and find that we can be successful even in those awkward moments, just because of how our perspective helps us deal with it and get through it. Measurement number 2 is how much people like us. We try to define our success in life by how many people like us. And when I say like, it is based on our clout, on how much people like us on social media or our Facebook pages or Twitter, how many people retweet me or how many people like what I'm saying. And so our view of being successful becomes part of how much influence we have, how many people are following us, how many people like what I say, how many people agree with me. And we can't base our life success off of that, because when we're measuring our units of success, it is individual. Your success is defined by your individual preferences and your own life priorities. Somebody else's is different than that. So they may not like what your priorities are or your life preferences. And that's okay. They're going to have their own. But it doesn't mean that because people don't like or don't agree with or don't follow what you are saying in your social life, that you're not a success. That has nothing to do with it, because it is unique. Our priorities and our lives and our life management goals, our goals in life just in general, are unique and specific to us. So even if people don't like what it is that we're saying or how we're living or what we're doing in our lives, and we're trying to measure it by the number of likes that we get, or the number of retweets that we get, or the number of followers that we have in our social media, we're really going to be disappointed, and we're setting ourselves up for failure, because we're trying to live up to what we think other people want us to say, or what we think people should embrace about us, and that is not accurate. Our success is unique to us, and it's based on our unique priorities, our unique life management circumstances, and our goals. And that's what's important. So a really bad way to measure ourselves, a tool that is wrong, that misleads us on so many levels, is this number 2, our clout and our influence. It is not a good way to measure our success in life using this, because it's very misleading. We can be very successful living for our unique priorities, and nobody else has to like it at all. They just don't. And that's something that's very difficult for us to take, because we want everybody to like it. We want everybody to be comfortable with it. And that's not the case. You set your goals. You set your life priorities. You set your life management wants and needs. And then you live those out. Well, that's unique to you. So you might be the only person that likes it, but that's okay, because as long as it's your priority and you have met that priority and you're living this out, you're successful in that, whether anybody else agrees with it or not. But we live in this mindset of, oh, our opinions all have to match, or, oh, the way we live our lives all have to match. And that's not true. Everything is unique to the individual who has set the goal or the priority. And that's where our success is found. It's not in what others think about it, but it's in how we live it out that we find the success in that. So we need to be very careful at number 2 when we are living our priorities based on the clout that we think should come from other people or our likability. Okay, measurement number 1 is based on our contribution. We try to measure our lives many times, the success in our lives, based on our contribution to society. And when we think about this, many times we're thinking that any contribution that we make has to impact the whole world, or it's not worth anything. And that's not true. Our impact only has to make a difference to one person. Maybe that is in our family. Maybe it's local. Maybe it's just in our community. Maybe you leave a contribution or volunteer or leave an impact or a legacy that affects the world. And that's okay. But it's unique to where you're living and what you're doing. You can be successful by contributing to an organization one time, by contributing to an organization 1,000 times, by contributing in large ways. Say you're a major donor and you contribute to an organization or something local or worldwide that impacts people. Say you donate $100,000. Well, yes, you've impacted many. But say you only donate $10 and you've impacted one person. You have still made a contribution, and that is successful. So many times we get caught up in the mindset of measuring our success as we measure our contribution to the world as, well, I can't do much, so I guess I haven't been successful there. I wish I could do more. Instead of seeing what it is that we've really done. And I have this plaque that hangs in my office, and it is one of my favorites because it says, to the world, you may be just one person, but to one person, you may be the world. And that is one of my favorite sayings because our impact, we can be successful in making a contribution by serving in our communities, by volunteering and being involved in organizations. Absolutely. Whether we have affected one person or 10,000 people, it all matters. And that is success. If we're making a contribution in impacting our family, if we're making a contribution in impacting our town, our city, the community that we live in, or whether it goes beyond that and impacts people worldwide. Sometimes we don't even know how much impact we've had in the world until after we've gone. We don't get to see it. But it doesn't mean that we have not been successful in impacting the world. So sometimes if we compare ourselves, it's like, wow, I've only volunteered in Hutchinson, Kansas, and how much of an impact have I really had? And we compare ourselves to somebody else who's been a global, they travel globally and they have had a reach that has been in every single country of the world. We compare ourselves to that and we feel insignificant of, wow, I haven't been successful at all. That is not true, because every little thing has an impact somewhere, and it has impacted someone, and we don't know where that someone will have an impact on another. And our impact then becomes greater because it keeps multiplying and affecting other people. So just because we may have only had an impact in one small area doesn't mean that we haven't been successful. So what we have to be careful of is comparing ourselves to people and others in the way that we feel that we've made an impact. We can measure our success in ways that are so wrong that we overlook many of the successes that we've had. Now, another area of our lives, when I'm talking about measuring and comparing each other, is if you have seen the Dove. They're called the Real Beauty Sketches by Dove, the manufacturer of the skincare products, the soaps and the shampoos and so forth. Dove has this real life beauty sketch thing where it was an FBI sketch artist. He came in and he had the women describe themselves, their facial features and stuff to him, and he drew a sketch. He had not seen the women at all. Then they had another woman who had just had met these women, come in and describe them. And he drew another sketch of the same women based off of their interpretation of their looks. And guess what? The women, when they described themselves, were very harsh on themselves. They described themselves in ways that were so harsh compared to the women who had just met them and described what they looked like to them. The same people, but they looked two different ways. The self-description was very harsh. The description that the other person gave of them was much softer and more beautiful. And it just shows that how when we compare ourselves to others, we don't get an accurate reflection. We are so harsh on ourselves. And when we compare ourselves and see maybe the success in other people, we're even harsh on ourselves in that aspect because we're just harder on ourselves than what somebody else would be. So we may not see the success or the beauty of the things that we've done in our lives compared to other people. We tend to overlook it because we're very harsh on ourselves. So if we're not comparing ourselves, what do? How do we live a life where we're not getting inaccurate units of measurement of our success? Well, how we do that is we have to look at our personal priorities, because our success is individual to us. If we define our success and compare somebody else to it, we make that person fail because they're not living up to what our successes are. So we have to define what our priorities are in life and then try to make our life match those priorities. Then we find success. We don't want to define what our priorities are and then try to live up to somebody else's idea of success. It doesn't work. We find ourselves then failing at that, and so then we label ourselves unsuccessful. What we want to do is we have to establish our own personal priorities in each of the 9 life areas. And those life areas are rest and relaxation, community, career, health, spirituality, relationships, entertainment, finance, and our self-improvement. Once we know what our priorities are in each of those life areas, we can make sure that we're living our lives to match that. Only then can we have an accurate reflection of our success. We can't measure our priorities against somebody else's idea of success, because their idea of success is based on their priorities, which are probably completely different than yours. And that's how it should be. Each unit of success is unique to your set of priorities and how you measure that. So, and also our success in life is based on our unique seasons. Our idea of success when we're 30 is going to be way different than what it is when we're 60. It goes back to that old Pinto and identifying success just based on the car that we were driving at that time in our lives. It's really different at 16 than what it is at 30. It's unique and it's based on our life seasons. So those are going to change, and our idea of success in that life season is going to change. So we have to define what our priorities are in life in order to measure the units of success. It's like that camping trip that I went on. Was it really having a perfect vacation that was free from any flaw? Or was success really defined by just having the time to spend with my kids and laugh and create memories? That's really what it was based on. And based on that, it was absolutely a success. Even though it was a disaster and it was hilarious and we still laugh about it, it absolutely was. It was successful. And so once we know what our priorities are in life and we know that we're being successful living those, we can just take small steps daily to live toward our priorities. And that's how we live a lifetime that becomes successful. Success is not just one moment that we're going to measure in our whole entire lives. It's not. We're going to measure our success by small steps that we take daily. And anytime we're moving towards our goals, anytime we're moving toward our life priorities, we've been successful. That is success. And that's how we live a life of success. Success is not just a one-time thing that just magically happens. Success comes when we take small steps daily to live out our life priorities and look back and say, you know, my life wasn't perfect. It wasn't that Disney life. It wasn't that castle that I thought I was going to have. It was none of that. But my life has absolutely been successful because these were my priorities. This is what was important to me. And I lived each day taking small steps to get there. And that's what we need to define our lives by. Not by these top 10 things, the amount of influence we have or likability, the number of good or bad hair days, of how much we weigh or how much we don't weigh, or the size of the tag that's on our clothing. By having perfect relationships or a perfect home, or the fanciest sports car, or the high-powered career, climbing that corporate ladder so high that we couldn't even begin to see what our goals were initially. If we try to define our lives based on those top 10 ideas that we think define our success, we can end up greatly deceived and think that we're not successful, when all along, when we really look at what our priorities were, we had actually been more successful than we ever dreamt that we could be. So that's how we have to make sure that we live a life measuring our success by using the proper tools, because only then will we really see how much success we've actually had. If we're using the wrong tools, we're not going to see any of it. We'll totally miss it and think that we failed, when in reality, we've been successful all along. Well, that was this presentation of measuring success by using the right tools, and I hope that it's something that you enjoyed. Again, this I had to re-record because the recording from the Seroptimus Women's Show had so much background noise. It was a great show, and there were so many people present that it just happened to pick up all of the background noise of all the individuals that were visiting and going to the health fair and so forth. So this is a re-recording of that, and I hope that this has served your needs. If you have any questions or anything additional that you would like to learn about life management, the information is available at moveintoaction.com. And if you have a question, feel free to shoot me an email or contact me there at the website. I would be really excited and more than happy to answer any questions that you have on either defining success or talking about success or talking about your life management and life priorities, so that you can live a life of measuring your success by gaining an accurate measurement by using the right tools. So I hope you've enjoyed this, and if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Thank you, and I really enjoyed doing the show.